Hi there. In this video, we're going to be reviewing the process for creating an invoice in Function Point. The process for creating an invoice can be started in one of two ways. We can simply hover our cursor over the Invoices module, hover over Add Invoice, and this will show us a list of jobs that we've looked at recently. If we see the job we want to create an invoice for, we'll select it. If we don't, we'll need to navigate to that job's details page. When looking at the Job Details page, up at the top right corner in our series of action buttons, we have a button that says Add Invoice. Select Add Invoice, and that brings us to our invoice type selection page. Here we can choose if we're working on a retainer basis, if it's an interim progress bill, or final. Final will mark the job as completed and will archive it. So we'll choose interim if we want to keep the job open. We can see a list of our previous invoices, update the invoice date, choose any tax groups that are applicable. The tax group will typically fill in automatically if it's something that you do need to manage. Click Submit, and that brings us to our actual invoice creation. Now this will display to you the phase and the service structure that the job is built on, the estimated value, the actual value. The actual value represents the billable value of time and expenses up until the date of the invoice. The variance between your estimate and your actual, previously invoiced amounts, and a remainder owing. The remainder owing in this case is a comparison between our previously invoiced amounts and either our estimated or our actuals, depending on how we choose for that to calculate. Then filling in our invoice amount is very simple. Click on the orange arrows in the header of the estimate, and that fills in our invoice amount with the value of our estimate. Click on Actuals, it does the same. Same with remainder. We can also enter a billing percentage. I can enter 50%, click on Estimate, and it enters 50% of my estimate. Now I can override any value. I can say let's bill $500 for research. Let's bill, let's say $400 for documentation, and let's bill an even $1,000 for sketches or roughs. Scrolling down, you'll notice that I have an example of an external expense, printing as my example. And you'll notice that I have values against my actuals. That's letting us know that there is either a purchase order or a vendor invoice entered against this expense. Clicking on the arrow beside the expense will give us the details, the description, quantity, rate, markup, and our cost to the client. Now we can manually enter the value that we would like to bill for this expense, or we can simply click on the checkbox beside the expense to mark it as being billed on this invoice. This is especially handy if you have a lot of expenses and you're not wanting to manually enter the value you want to bill or do a manual calculation. Simply click on the checkbox for the expenses that you want to bill. Scrolling down, I'll select Preview, and that gives us a total for our invoice. Click Create Invoice, and this next page will provide you with an option to update currency conversions, update existing job descriptions, enter custom descriptions or custom payment notes that you want to show up on your invoice. Click Submit, and that's our invoice created. This is now an overview of the details, including the number, the date, and the type, the total due, amount paid, and the balance owing. This is where we can print off our client-facing version. And this may look quite a bit different than your invoice, depending on the template or the structure that you have for your client-facing invoices in your system. That concludes the video on creating an invoice. Again, continue checking out more of our videos for more helpful information on using Function Point.